After a series of brutal killings, a secret team captures what should not exist, only to uncover a bloodline curse hiding in plain sight. I'm Mr. Midnight Hollow, your terrifying host. If you're already part of our pack, your support means the world to us. Each like, comment, and share helps uncover more stories like this. Or subscribe to see what rises from the depths of darkness and unfolds before you. Now, let's begin. I never thought I'd return to West Virginia. My last time here ended with 3 bodies zipped in bags and a blood trail that no rain could wash off. But when the call came in, past midnight, encrypted, urgent, I knew it wasn't a prank. It was an old contact. A man I hadn't spoken to in 7 years. His voice cracked with fear. "They're hiding it," he whispered. "You've got to come. Before more people die." The location, Charleston, capital city, nestled in the Appalachian Hills. Beautiful in the fall, sinister when quiet. Reports of mauled animals, people vanishing near the outskirts, and strange tracks in the woods had started surfacing. Locals blamed bears or meth addicts, but I knew better. I've seen enough to know when something wasn't human. We didn't operate like the others. We were a shadow unit, off books, funded by buried accounts, and created after one too many animal attacks left towns in ruins. We cleaned up the horrors no one wanted to believe in. My team was small but seasoned. Jonas Blackwell, our field lead, was a former USMC scout sniper from Montana. Cold, methodical, deadly. Kira Hastings, a trauma nurse from Detroit with a family history of folk rituals and a sixth sense I never questioned. And me, Grayson Leclerc, logistics and tracking. Former wildlife control turned hunter of things the government doesn't name. We called ourselves whatever the situation demanded. But deep down, we were exterminators, ghosts, killers of legends. By 5 a.m., we were on a flight from D.C. to Yeager Airport. The moment we touched down, we were met not by the sheriff or state police, but by a state legislator named Howard Rusk. 58, jittery hands, thick southern drawl. He drove us in an unmarked truck down Route 60 toward a remote cabin, claimed it was safer to talk off the grid. Inside, the cabin reeked of wood rot and stale whiskey. Rusk dropped a thick envelope on the table. Photos spilled out, some of livestock, some of human remains. Mutilated bodies left out like butcher shop waste, limbs missing, torsos torn wide open, faces unrecognizable. "The county coroner said feral dogs," he muttered, staring at his boots. "But dogs don't strip bone this clean, and dogs don't walk upright." Jonas stayed quiet, flipping through the images. One photo in particular made him stop. A teenager, maybe 17, eyes still open in the picture, his chest a cavern of splintered ribs. "Who's this?" Jonas asked. "Name was Levi Carr," Rusk said. "Went missing after a bonfire party up on Blue Ridge Hill. His folks thought he'd run off. 2 days later, hikers found what was left of him hanging from a tree." Kira covered her mouth. "That's not just a kill," she whispered. "That's ritual. Display." Rusk nodded slowly. "And it ain't the first. I've seen things here going back decades. Bodies half-eaten, sightings of something tall, fast, howling at night. Always written off, but it's getting worse. Closer." Jonas lit a cigarette and leaned back. "You called us for one reason. You think someone in town knows what's going on." Rusk's eyes darted toward the window. "It's not someone. It's a family." He opened a manila folder labeled Ward. Black and white photos, newspaper clippings, medical records. Generations of politicians, landowners, war heroes. And one name circled in red, Nathaniel Ward. Last known son of the Ward legacy, Rusk said. Disappeared 5 years ago. Hikers claimed they saw him near Kanawha Forest 3 nights ago, except he's supposed to be dead. My chest tightened. The wards were Charleston royalty, land rich, politically untouchable, the kind of people who donated libraries and buried bodies in the same week. I believe he's the one behind this, Rusk said. Or what he became. Whatever killed that kid, it wasn't Levi's first time seeing it. There were claw marks on his back, like he'd survived something before and didn't tell anyone. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. I knew that sound. I knew the way it made the leaves still, like the forest was holding its breath. Jonas stood up, holstered his pistol. Where's the last known sighting? Route 214, Rusk said. Off the old mine road. There's a farmhouse no one's lived in for years. Neighbors say lights come on during full moons. Sometimes they hear... He paused, swallowing. They hear something cry like a man and scream like a dying animal. We loaded our gear in silence. Sedative darts, silver-lined cuffs, emergency flares. Nothing that would make the headlines. Kira wore her necklace, a crude iron charm from her grandmother's roots in Louisiana. You believe in this? I asked her once. I don't have to, she replied. But they do. That's enough. The farmhouse was 3 miles into the trees, isolated, windows shattered. A rusted mailbox hung open like a broken jaw. As we approached, we noticed the smell, copper, rot, and something musky that clung to the air. Inside, dust blanketed everything. But someone had been there recently. Footprints, food wrappers, scratches on the wooden walls, deep, erratic. And in the corner of the living room, a torn shirt. Blood dried on the fabric. A dog tag clinked when I lifted it. Nathaniel Ward. A low growl echoed from beneath the floorboards. Jonas aimed his rifle at the trap door. Kira whispered, "Something's down there." I moved to lift the hatch, and that's when we heard the first scream outside. It wasn't human, but it wasn't fully animal either. We rushed out, weapons drawn, and found one of Rusk's men, or what was left of him. His body was sprawled against a tree, ribs exposed, heart missing. Blood pooled in the dirt. His eyes were wide open. Jonas muttered, "It's here." And something answered from the tree line, a long, distorted sound that chilled every bone in my body. We weren't hunting it. It was waiting for us. The morning air in Kanawha County tasted like rust and mold. A mist hung low across the trees as we followed the trail of broken branches and bloody soil away from the farmhouse. Whatever had ripped that man apart did it in seconds, and didn't linger. We found the first track nearly 60 feet into the tree line. A footprint, partially human, but elongated, heavier in the heel with clawed toes sunk deep into the mud. It wasn't fresh, but the blood was. Jonas crouched next to it. 200 pounds, easy, running upright, fast. I looked at the direction the tracks led. East, toward Route 60, toward Charleston. "Why go back?" Kira asked. "Why leave the woods now?" "Because it's not hiding," Jonas said. "It's hunting." We moved quickly, sticking to the shadows. The forest was silent again. Too silent. No birds, no bugs. Just the crunch of leaves beneath our boots and the distant echo of running water. At the tree line, we found the second body. She was maybe in her late 30s, jogger, earbuds still tangled around her neck. Her arms were gone, torn clean off. Her torso slashed open like it had been split with a machete. But the worst part was her face. It was intact. Eyes open, mouth frozen in a scream. Kira swallowed hard. "Why leave the face?" "Message," Jonas muttered. Or something else. There were more tracks around the body. Same deep imprints, same twisted shape. But this time, they circled the corpse before darting into the highway brush. Route 60 lay less than half a mile ahead. 2 lanes, winding through the hills. No traffic. Fog hung thick over the asphalt. We moved parallel to the road, weapons drawn, eyes scanning for movement. Then we saw the wreckage. A delivery truck had slammed into the guardrail. Its front end was crushed, the windshield shattered outward. The doors were still open. The cab was empty, but not clean. Blood coated the dashboard. Thick smears lined the seat. Claw marks shredded the vinyl interior. Jonas leaned in, scanning. He never got out. Something pulled him through the windshield. Kira looked up the road. There's something there. In the distance, past the curve in the road, a shape stood motionless. Humanoid. Naked. Gaunt. It was at least 7 feet tall. Long arms. Pale, mottled skin. It didn't move, just watched us. Jonas raised his rifle. "No," I said. "Wait." The thing turned and ran into the trees, silent, fast, fluid. We followed. It led us deeper into the forest where the sun barely pierced the canopy. Jonas moved like a predator, but even he was unnerved. After a mile, we found the old ranger station. Abandoned. Roof half collapsed. Doors broken in. Inside, the smell hit us like a wall. Feces. Blood. Wet fur. The main room was a nest. Piles of leaves. Bones. Animal and human. Bits of cloth. And pinned to the wall with a broken antler, a photograph. 4 people. Smiling. A man, a woman, and 2 boys. One of them was Nathaniel Ward. Kira stared. This was his family. Jonas pulled the photo down. Then this is where it began. Something creaked above us. We turned, weapons up, and saw the trapdoor in the ceiling, an attic crawl space. Jonas climbed the ladder, rifle slung, flashlight in hand. Silence. Then a whisper. I couldn't tell what he heard, but his body froze. He stared into the dark above him, mouth slightly open. Then he climbed higher. Kira moved to follow, but I stopped her. Wait. A second later, Jonas dropped back down. His face was pale. It's here, he said. It was watching us. What was? Jonas pointed at the hatch. Something had been living up there. Sleeping, feeding. And it left just before we got here. Kira looked at him. You saw it? I saw the back of it. Not fully shifted. Still human. But its eyes. Those weren't human. Then we heard the scream. Not from the attic. From outside. Rusk's second bodyguard. We rushed out. He was slumped against the ranger station wall, his chest flayed open, entrails hanging, throat torn halfway through. Kira covered her mouth. Jonas scanned the trees. Then we saw the footprints. Fresh. Deep. Still steaming. One set, but facing away. He didn't want us, I muttered. He could have taken us inside, but he didn't. Jonas looked at me. Then why kill the guard? Kira answered for both of us. Because he's getting bolder, and because next time it won't be a warning. I turned back to the station and saw it, scratched into the wood of the door, barely legible. I'm still in here. We stood in silence. Then the sky darkened, and distant thunder rumbled in the mountains. The full moon was one night away. The sky had turned a shade of iron gray when we arrived at the outskirts of Kanawha Forest. Rain misted down in cold sheets as we turned onto a gravel path that wound up a ridge, flanked by black pines and silence. At the end of the road stood a house that didn't belong to this century. The Ward Farm. 3 stories tall. Victorian frame. Windows boarded with warped plywood. Paint peeled from every wall. A rusted wind vane creaked atop the roof. The land around it was lifeless. No crops, no animals, just brittle grass and fences caved in under time. This place hasn't been touched in decades, Kira said, voice low. It was sold, I replied. Back in '98, but records show it never changed hands again. Jonas scanned the tree line, rifle in hand. Feels like it's waiting for something. We moved in through the side door. The wood cracked under our boots. Inside, the air was stagnant, damp and suffocating. The living room looked like it had been left mid-sentence. Plates still on the table. A tea kettle fossilized on the stove. Upstairs, we found old family portraits, frames hanging crooked on cracked walls. Nathaniel Ward was in most of them. Tall, smiling, clean-cut, a golden boy from a family of local legends. His parents were nowhere in sight. Kira examined a bookshelf with tax records, land deeds, and a locked metal file. She forced it open. Inside were photos. Victims from the last 20 years, printed, catalogued, notes written in the margins. The ink was faded, but legible. Doesn't remember the kills. Still resists transformation. Stronger each cycle. Someone documented all of this, Kira said, horrified, like a journal. Jonas flipped to the last photo. A girl, young, maybe 8. Her face was bruised, her eyes swollen shut. Scrawled underneath, "She saw him. No survivors." Then we heard the first thud. From below. A rhythmic, hollow pounding beneath the floorboards. Jonas motioned for silence. We moved toward the back hallway, where an old trapdoor lay half concealed by a rug. I knelt and listened, breathing. Slow. Labored. Jonas opened the door with his boot. The basement exhaled. A staircase descended into pitch black. We switched to red light filters and moved down, one by one. The smell was overwhelming. Mold, rot, and old blood. The basement wasn't just a storage space. It was a containment area. Chains hung from the walls. Steel hooks embedded in the concrete. Deep claw marks lined the brick like something had tried to climb out. In the center was a padded cell, homemade, rusted shut. Inside it, bones, human and animal, and carved into the wall, hundreds of times. "Don't let me out." Kira shuddered. "He was kept here, caged." "Not just kept," I said. "Conditioned, tested." Jonas pointed to a rusted IV rack, medical trays, syringes scattered across the floor. Someone was drugging him, trying to suppress the transformations. "This wasn't a secret," Kira whispered. "This was a program." We explored further and found the office. Locked, reinforced door. Jonas kicked it open. Inside were maps of Charleston, notes on lunar cycles, and a massive genealogy chart of the Ward family, highlighting Nathaniel's name in bold red. At the bottom corner, "Control through sedation fails after 6 transformations." Suddenly we heard movement upstairs. A soft step, then another. Jonas raised his rifle. "We're not alone." We moved quickly up the stairs, sweeping the house. But the rooms were empty. That's when we heard it again, just outside the window. Kira stepped to the glass. She gasped. "It's him!" Jonas and I rushed over. A figure stood at the edge of the woods, shirtless, tall, muscles stretched unnaturally across his frame, eyes shining with unnatural light. But it wasn't the creature, not fully, not yet. It was Nathaniel Ward, and he was watching us. Then he vanished into the trees. Jonas turned, grabbing his radio. "We track him now, before moonrise." But before we could leave, something exploded behind the house. A fireball consumed the back shed, sending debris into the air. The blast threw Kira to the ground. Jonas pulled her up. I turned and saw movement behind the trees. 3 figures in dark gear, holding rifles, not police, not hunters, professionals. They didn't come for help. They came to erase this. Jonas cursed. "They're scrubbing the site." Bullets ripped through the farmhouse walls. We scattered. Kira fired back with her sidearm. I grabbed the files, the photos, anything we could carry. and we escaped through the cellar door, disappearing into the woods. Behind us, the Ward farm burned, and with it, the last trace of what Nathaniel had been. We didn't stop running until we were 2 miles deep into the forest. The air was heavy, the ground slick with rain. Behind us, the Ward farm was a smoldering memory. Whoever those armed men were, they were prepared, fast, lethal, and determined to wipe everything clean. Jonas crouched near a tree, catching his breath. "They're not local. No sheriff's department has that kind of gear," I said. "They're federal or private." Kira looked pale, holding a bleeding scratch on her arm. They didn't just come to kill us. They came to silence Nathaniel's existence. We knew we couldn't go back into Charleston. The town was too connected, too compromised. Instead, we contacted a contact of mine, Luther Bishop, a retired journalist turned conspiracy archivist, living in St. Albans, about 15 miles west. We moved at night, cutting through back roads, hitching rides in utility trucks. Luther met us behind a closed auto shop, his eyes wide when he saw us drenched, bloody, and carrying evidence. He didn't ask questions until we were inside his bunker-like basement. "You found the Ward boy?" he asked, flipping through the blood-stained photos. "He's alive," Kira said, "but not human anymore. They tried to contain him. It failed." Luther leaned back. There were always rumors about the Wards. An uncle in the 40s who used to howl at night. Stories of children disappearing in the hills. They owned everything, from city council to the police chief. People stopped asking questions. He pulled out an old manila folder. But here's what no one knows. Nathaniel had a child, secretly, with a local woman named Melissa Rayner. She died 3 years ago in a car accident. No autopsy, no follow-up. Jonas frowned. "And the child?" "Boy," Luther said. "Name's Elias Rayner. Lives with a foster family just outside Nitro. 17, tall, quiet. Medical records show severe night terrors and a hormone disorder no one could diagnose." Kira's voice was tight. "He's changing." I felt the weight settle in my chest. He might not even know what he is yet. Jonas stood. "If he shifts without control, we're looking at another massacre." We left before dawn, heading northwest toward Nitro. The rain had stopped, but the sky was bruised, the clouds thick like wet cement. Every mile felt like borrowed time. Elias's foster home sat at the edge of a dying neighborhood. Small houses, peeling paint, too many windows covered with blankets instead of curtains, no lights on inside. We approached quietly. Jonas covered the back. Kira and I knocked. A woman answered, gaunt and hollow-eyed. "You looking for Elias?" "We need to talk to him," I said, flashing a fabricated ID. "Medical concern." She stared for a moment, then stepped aside. Elias was in the kitchen, leaning against the fridge. He looked just like Nathaniel. Same bone structure, same dark eyes. But there was something off, something under the skin. "You're not doctors," he said. Voice calm, too calm. "We're here to help," Kira offered gently. He looked at her, then at me. "It started last year. Dreams, screams. Hunger I don't understand. When I'm alone, things move. I black out. Wake up covered in dirt." He stepped forward. "Last month, a dog got loose. Attacked me. I grabbed it and I broke its spine. I didn't try, I just reacted." His hands were trembling. "I think I'm sick." Kira placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're not sick, Elias. You're inherited." Before we could explain further, the house shook. A roar, no, a cry, ripped through the air outside. Jonas burst into the room. "He's here." Nathaniel. Through the window, we saw him, half-shifted, skin like torn leather stretched over muscle, yellowed claws. eyes wild but locked onto Elias. He didn't attack. He just stood there, watching. Elias stepped toward the window, hand pressed to the glass. "Who is he?" he asked. "Your father," I said. "Or what's left of him." Outside, Nathaniel let out a sound that made the walls vibrate. Then he turned and vanished into the tree line behind the house. Kira looked at me, voice shaking. He came to see his son, not to kill, not this time. Jonas reloaded his weapon. Next time he won't come to say goodbye. I stared out the window where Nathaniel had stood. He wasn't running anymore. He was circling, and Elias was the next phase of whatever was coming. We left the foster home just before midnight. Elias came willingly, quiet and pale, his eyes fixed on nothing. Kira rode beside him in the back of the van we borrowed from Luther. She tried talking. He didn't respond. "He doesn't know who he is," she whispered to me. "But his body does." Jonas had picked an abandoned rail yard outside of Hurricane, about 25 miles out. Tall fencing, remote, easy to secure. We couldn't risk another incident near civilians. The rain came back in bursts, cold and sharp. Lightning streaked above the skeletal remains of boxcars and corroded tracks. We set up a holding station in an old shipping container reinforced with steel bars and drugged air vents. Every precaution we had left. "We'll sedate him every 6 hours," Jonas instructed. "If he starts to shift, we hit him with double the dose." "And if it doesn't work?" I asked. He didn't answer. Inside the container, Elias sat silently, shackled to the wall. He didn't scream, didn't cry, just watched us with the detached gaze of someone drowning in his own mind. Kira stayed with him most of the night, chanting quiet prayers and folk blessings passed down from her grandmother. "This isn't just biological," she told me. "There's something spiritual riding inside him." By morning, his temperature had spiked to 104 degrees. His skin was boiling, eyes bloodshot, muscles twitching. Jonas prepped the tranquilizer rifle. He's fighting the change. We heard it before we saw it. Something moving fast through the yard. Then a body slammed against the side of the container, denting the metal like paper. Not Elias. Nathaniel. He had tracked us through the hills and waited until Elias was alone. We sprang into action. Jonas fired the first dart through the viewing slit. It struck the creature in the neck, but it didn't stop him. He ripped the door off the container like it was made of cardboard. Chaos followed. I tackled Elias to the ground, dragging him away as Nathaniel stormed inside. Jonas and Kira unloaded 3 more darts into him, and only then did he falter. Legs giving out, body convulsing. He collapsed with a groan that felt more human than beast. It was over. Or so we thought. Elias had changed. Blood poured from his nose, his mouth. His eyes turned pitch black for a moment, and his veins bulged like wires under his skin. "I can feel him," Elias whispered. "He's in me." Then he screamed and tore the restraints from his wrists. Jonas aimed the rifle, but Kira threw herself in front. "No!" We watched as Elias convulsed, then slumped, still breathing. Human. But for how long? Nathaniel, sedated and unconscious, lay on the ground nearby. For the first time, we saw him fully, half man, half beast. His face was warped, but familiar, his body scarred from years of transformation. His chest rose and fell with labored breath. Kira approached him cautiously. "We can't kill him." Jonas was silent. I looked at the two of them, father and son, monsters in different stages of becoming. "We cage them both," I said, "until we figure this out." But night was falling again, and one of them was starting to wake up. The old rail yard had turned into a fortress overnight. We reinforced the container with thick chains and welded steel beams across the doors. Inside, both Nathaniel and Elias were sedated, monitored, and restrained. But we knew this was temporary. They weren't just stronger than humans, they were evolving. Kira stayed close to Elias, her presence the only thing that kept him grounded. Jonas patrolled the perimeter, his weapon always ready, jaw clenched tighter by the hour. Then, just past noon, a black SUV approached from the south. We recognized the plates. Mayor Gordon Ward, brother to Nathaniel, stepped out surrounded by 4 armed men in tactical gear. They wore no badges, no insignias, but their weapons were real and aimed. Jonas was already at the gate. "Turn around, now!" Gordon didn't flinch. He was dressed in a tailored suit, raincoat draped over his shoulders, and a calm, calculated expression on his face. "I know what you've got in there," he said, "and I'm here to fix it." I stepped forward. "You mean cover it up?" He smiled. "Same difference." We led him inside the main office of the rail hub, an old control room with cracked monitors and rusted equipment. His men waited outside, guns lowered. For now. Kira refused to join. She wouldn't leave Elias. "Let's not waste time," I said. "Your brother is alive. You knew that." Gordon nodded slowly. "He was never dead. We staged the accident, after the first transformation." "And the killings," Jonas growled. "The mutilations?" Gordon didn't blink. "Collateral. The Ward bloodline carries a condition. Our grandfather had it. Our father, too. It skips generations sometimes, but when it strikes, it devours everything." "You could have contained it," I said. We tried. The basement at the farm, the sedatives, the surgeries. We brought in specialists, paid them well, but Nathaniel broke free, and we knew the risk would multiply. He looked me dead in the eyes. "That's why we had to burn the house, erase the history, and now? We end it here." Kira's voice cut in over the comms. "He wants to kill them both." I turned toward Jonas, but Gordon was faster. He snapped his fingers. His men stormed the container. Gunfire erupted. We sprinted outside. Too late. One of the mercenaries lay on the ground, his throat torn out. Another screamed from inside the container. The chains had been broken. Jonas fired into the door as something inside moved violently, tossing bodies against the walls. Kira screamed from the other side. I ran to her, forcing the emergency latch open. Elias stood in the corner, eyes dark, mouth bloody, arms trembling. He hadn't fully transformed, but he had killed. Nathaniel was gone. The back wall had been ripped open from the inside. Elias looked at me, his voice shaking. "He's loose." Outside, chaos spread. Nathaniel, fully shifted, ripped through the remaining guards, tearing into flesh like paper. His jaw snapped one man's spine in half. Another tried to run, didn't make it far. Gordon backed toward his SUV, screaming into his radio. Nathaniel caught him. In a single motion, he lifted the mayor into the air and impaled him on a jagged steel bar protruding from an old rail tie. Gordon gasped, blood pouring from his mouth. Nathaniel didn't move. He just stared into his brother's eyes as the life drained out of him. Then he ran. Back into the forest. Into the hills. Kira stood beside Elias, holding him tightly. He was sobbing, covered in blood, shaking violently. "He's not just a monster," she whispered. "He remembers every kill, every face." Jonas stared at the carnage. Now he has no reason left to hide. We buried the dead in silence. The rain had washed away most of the blood by dawn, but not the smell. It clung to everything, clothes, skin, memory. The burned bodies of the mayor's men were unrecognizable. We left them where they fell. No one would come looking. We relocated. A decommissioned cold storage facility near Sissonville, 2 hours north, offered thick walls and one way in. The perfect place to make a final stand. Or a grave. Inside, Jonas rigged tripwires, motion sensors, and 3 fallback zones. We knew Nathaniel would come back. He wasn't done. He was hunting us now. Elias hadn't spoken since the attack. He sat in a storage cell, cuffed but calm. Kira refused to leave him, her arms bruised, her eyes hollow. "He's close," she whispered. "He's in pain. That's all I feel. Pain." Jonas didn't care. He'd already set a bullet aside. If he shifts again, he dies. But I wasn't so sure. There was something else happening. Elias hadn't lost control during the last attack. He'd stopped halfway through the shift. He held it back. Something Nathaniel never could. We spent the day preparing. By nightfall, we were exhausted, wired, and half mad from fear. Then, the power cut out. Not just in the building. The whole block went dark. Jonas turned toward me. "He's here." We activated the backup generators. Dim, flickering halogens lit the main corridor. We took positions. And then it started. Screams from the roof. One of our lookouts, Luther's contact, was torn in half, his body thrown through a skylight. The rain poured in through the hole like blood from a wound. Jonas ran toward the control room. I stayed with Kira and Elias. The pounding on the steel doors began seconds later. Not random. Measured. Focused. Nathaniel was testing the structure. The first breach came through the eastern wall. He moved like a shadow with claws. Jonas fired twice, missed once. The third shot grazed Nathaniel's ribs, but it didn't slow him. He tore into the control room. When we reached it, Jonas was gone. His rifle lay in a puddle of his blood. Kira gasped. "We need to end this." I turned to Elias. He looked up at me. "I can feel him thinking," he said. "He wants you all gone. But he doesn't want me dead. He wants me to become like him. We're not letting that happen. But what if it already did?" Suddenly the alarms tripped. Nathaniel had breached the main corridor. Lights exploded overhead. Sparks rained down. The floor trembled beneath each of his steps. Kira grabbed the tranquilizer rifle. "Cover me." We moved into the hall. The beast was at the far end, shoulders hunched, covered in blood. His eyes were glowing like fire. In one hand, he held Jonas's head. He dropped it, then charged. Kira fired. The first dart hit his neck. He roared, stumbled, but kept coming. The second hit his chest. He slowed, but not enough. Kira was thrown into the wall with a sound I won't describe. Her body slumped, motionless. I fired the last dart. Nathaniel fell, hard, body twitching, breathing erratic. But he wasn't unconscious. He was evolving, pushing through sedation. His skin cracked. His spine stretched, muscles bulged. He was beyond what we'd faced before. The transformation was eating what was left of the man. Elias stepped past me slowly. He knelt beside his father. Nathaniel growled, but didn't strike. They stared at each other, no words, just a look. And then Elias whispered something I didn't understand. Nathaniel collapsed, eyes open, dead. I didn't move for several seconds. Then I looked at Elias. "What did you do?" He didn't answer, just walked back into the dark, his hands shaking, his face unreadable. The threat was gone. But something in Elias had changed, and it wasn't done with him yet. We burned Nathaniel's body that same night. There was no ceremony, no final words, just fire, steel barrels, and gasoline stolen from a wrecked patrol car. We watched him turn to smoke under the black sky, and still, no one said anything. Jonas was dead. Kira, barely alive, was rushed to an underground contact in Beckley. Someone who owed Luther favors and wouldn't ask questions. Her spine was shattered. She might never walk again. I drove Elias out of Sissonville before sunrise. The roads were empty, the air sharp and cold, like the hills themselves were watching us leave. He didn't speak. He hadn't said a word since the moment Nathaniel died. But something was different. He wasn't shaking, he wasn't afraid. We stopped at a cabin owned by a former agency handler, deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Off-grid, no cameras, no internet, just land, trees, and isolation. I tried to talk to him. To explain that he needed to stay hidden, that people would come for him if they found out what he was. He just stared through the window. "They'll never stop," he finally said. "Because it's not just me, is it?" I sat down. "No, probably not." He turned toward me, face unreadable. "I feel them, out there, others." I said nothing. He continued, "And I can feel it inside me. It's quiet now. But I know it'll wake up again." I tried to offer comfort, a plan, something to give him hope. But he wasn't listening. He was waiting. Days passed. I kept him monitored. Doses of suppressants, herbal mixtures from Kira's instructions, small rituals. Nothing held it back for long. By the third night, the dreams returned. He would wake drenched in sweat, eyes glowing, breath ragged. He begged me to chain him, so I did. One morning, I found the chains broken, but he was still there, untouched, and he whispered, "It's learning to live with me." The weeks blurred. He started reading obsessively, books on genetics, mythology, anatomy. He studied his own blood under a microscope with tools I had smuggled in. "It's mutating," he said one night. "The transformation isn't random. It's adapting, getting smarter." I asked him what he meant. It doesn't want to be a curse anymore. It wants to survive. Then one day, he was gone. No note, no noise, just his bed, perfectly made, and his shackles lying on the floor, unbroken. I searched the mountains for days. Nothing. But I knew better than to expect a goodbye. That was 6 months ago. Last week, I received an envelope. No return address, just a single item inside. A photo. It was blurry, grainy, taken from a distance. It showed a man, tall, lean, walking into a crowd at a state fair in Lexington, Kentucky. His back was to the camera, but I knew the posture. Elias. On the back of the photo, written in simple pen strokes, "It's not over." I keep that photo in my jacket. I haven't hunted since. Kira's alive, recovering slowly. She won't speak about that night. Not to me, not to anyone. Luther disappeared. Off the map, probably gone underground. As for me, I listen to the news now. Reports of animal attacks, bodies found without blood. A child missing from a foster home near Pennsylvania. 2 hikers mauled in Ohio. A prison riot in Georgia. Only the violent offenders were killed. Throats torn out. No suspects. No witnesses. But I know he's still out there. And worse. I think he's not alone. Maybe he found others. Maybe he's building something. Or maybe the blood just calls to its own. So I ask you now, if you discovered that something ancient lived in your family, if the thing in your blood could wake up one night and rip the world apart, what would you do? Would you run? Would you hide? Or would you listen to it and let it take over? Because some monsters aren't born. They're inherited, and they're waiting for the next full moon. Gabriel's story in West Virginia is a grim reminder that the real monsters aren't always hiding in the woods. Sometimes, they're born inside the very homes we trust. The bloodline curse may have been silenced for now, but the next transformation could already be stirring beneath someone else's skin. Like this video, if you felt the dread closing in with every moonrise. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done if it were your family? Share this with someone who still believes monsters are just stories told to scare children. They need to hear the truth. And above all, if you've got the courage, subscribe to Mr. Midnight Horror and ring that bell. So when the darkness comes again, you won't face it alone.